Hey everyone, it's Rob Ryder on Sunday, May 18th, 2014, and I'm going to take the Pope's advice. He said this week, imitate Christ. Think of him, pray to him, imitate him. And of course it says that in many places in canon law. It says if you're baptized, you hold the kingly, prophetic, priestly office of Christ, because Christ is an office. So, what does imitate mean? To follow as a model or as a pattern. All right, excellent. And I believe that if we do this, imitate Christ, by claiming an office that's available to us within the church, that the civil authority awaits your, my command. And so I'm going to kind of show you where this comes from, at least what I can read. What it looks like it says. I'm going to go out and try this week, and we'll see how it goes by next weekend. So if you want to know what happened, you're just going to have to wait, or you can go ask the same questions yourself, because the more people that ask these questions to the right people or to find the right person, the more chances we have of finding it. It may be a matter of running into an angel the first time, because yes, there are devil-worshipping pagans within the church. Absolutely, and they don't want you to get your remedy. And they're in the church, and they're in the government, and they're in the courts, and they're in the police departments, and they're in everything. Agencies, you name it, they're in there. They're running them. So, something I want to show you to start with is why I've decided I'm going to quit looking for an answer within the secular world. So, here's an example. Let's see what we got here. Example 1. This was, I did a video on this earlier. This was about some Judiciary Act of 1801, which is called the Midnight Judges Act. And it's in an earlier video I did. I'm not reading it to you. You can get this right off of, I believe this is Wikipedia. All right. In addition to creating new lifetime posts for Federalist judges. Right? What's a Federalist judge compared to a federal judge? Federalist was a party. So that was one of the parties, the Federalist, but then they come up with this other party called the Democrat-Republican Party. So in 1801 there were two parties, the Federalist Party and the Democrat-Republican Party. Well, now we just have one party called the Democrat-Republican Party. Them's the Democrats, and over here is the Republicans. They're on the same party. One party system, communism. You've been in it since 1801. There's only one system. There's only one party. It's the Democrat-Republican Party. I don't know what happened to the Federalists, but they were trying to get more judgeships, Federalist judges. Now, again, this is Wikipedia. Maybe they made a mistake what they were talking about the Federalist judges, but I've seen this thing about the Democratic Republican Party before. So it's a party. And so Democrats and Republicans are on the same party, or in the same party. Okay, so now this is a picture of the seal, the Great Seal for the state of Michigan. And forgetting everything else, just pay attention to the moose here on the right. That's a moose, and see how his snout is looking in. Let's go look at a seal, which I believe is supposed to be the seal of the state of Michigan around the outside edges. We'll show you what it's on here shortly. But whatever this critter is, he's not looking towards the center. He's looking towards the side, over his back. And the shield's a wrong shape, and so forth and so on. So, that's what it's supposed to look like. Great Seal. This is what it looks like. And this is on an oath of a probate judge for the state of Michigan. Right? Who swore his oath before somebody named P. William O'Grady, who, when we looked at his oath before, I showed his oath before, it hasn't been done properly. He's not holding the office. He wasn't elected. None of these people were elected either. Not only don't they have the right oath, this is why they don't have the right oath. One of the reasons, well, they were never elected. They didn't follow the steps it takes for an election. It's pretty simple. Yeah, I know they're sitting there and they look like they are, but they're not. So, and on top of that, then, these are supposed to be the public official bonds for these officials of the county, like the sheriff of Branch County. Well, the sheriff of Branch County, until Jerry went down and asked and pestered the hell out of them to get to see their bonds, they never gave any bonds. Now, these bonds are supposed to be kept, again, this is by the law, with the county treasurer. Shouldn't be that big a deal. Go to the county treasurer, I'd like to see the sheriff's bond. Oh, we ain't got it. It's because they don't have one. Now you can see John Pollock, who's supposed to be the sheriff, he hasn't signed this thing. And it didn't come out of the treasurer's office. This is the administrator controller. No date. Right? It's not correct. So the sheriff doesn't have a bond. Register of Deeds didn't sign hers. She doesn't have a bond. William O'Grady, the guy who we just saw here, right there, he's William O'Grady. Here he's P. William O'Grady. This guy's got 4 different names he runs around town with. Little fucking felon. William O'Grady says he's a circuit court judge. Circuit court judge ain't got no bond. And none of this stuff is with the treasurer where it's supposed to be, because guess what? The treasurer didn't have a bond. He didn't take an oath. He doesn't exist. This is all color of law. None of these offices exist. So why do you keep trying to go to that side to try to get an answer? Ain't going to happen. They don't have bonds, man. They don't have oaths. They're not holding the office. Yes, they're criminals. I know. So what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to go to the church. That's my idea. So let me see here. And the reason for that can be found in everybody's favorite papal bull, Unum Sanctum. The one holy. This, I'm sure right now there's Protestants that have just fallen out of their chair and they're twitching on the floor. Get up, man. It's no big deal. Just think about this. So Unum Sanctum came out in 1302. And it was during a dispute between the church and a guy named Philip the Fair, who was the king of France. And the date's 1302. Well, in 1307, I think it was, our same Philip the Fair rounded up all the Templars and said that they were all heretics overnight and killed them. And he took over the system that the Templars had put into place, all the gold and so forth. Yeah, that's what he did. Right? Some king decided they were heretics and didn't talk to the Pope. In fact, I think he put Boniface the VIII here. I believe he put him in prison, and that Boniface died in prison. And this began the period of time where they had the anti-popes down in someplace in France. That's my gist of it, right? This Unum Sanctum came out because Philip the Fair was a devil-worshipping pagan who was following men that were learned in the law, who said, man, look at all this wealth the church has. You could have all that. We could help you get it. You just need to put us in these offices that these guys are in. So, nevertheless, what did Unum Sanctum have to say? It was mainly about the spiritual and secular power. What freaks most Protestants out is the fact that it says at the very end, it talks about the Pope being, I'll get to the exact words. We'll just go look at that last sentence. But I'm only interested in it myself because of one thing. It talked about the spiritual and secular power, and it says, under the control of the church are 2 swords. That is 2 powers. The expression referring to the medieval theory of the 2 swords, the spiritual and secular. This is substantiated by the customary reference to the swords of the apostles at the arrest of Christ. Both swords are in the power of the church. The spiritual is wielded in the church by the hand of the clergy. The secular to be employed for the church by the hand of the civil authority. All right, so the spiritual is wielded in the church by the hand of the clergy. And all this is about, we're going to be getting an office within the church that's going to make us part of that clergy. And the secular is to be employed by the church by the hand of the civil authority. And we're going to get the civil authority then to carry out our orders, because it's within the church. It's the church determine who the civil authority is. And I've been looking for the civil authority and come to find out it is in the church. Right? It isn't some probate judge or chief judge of civil court or circuit court or whatever. No, it's some, I don't know how they're going to get to them, but it will come through the church to whoever it is. So, without further ado, let's see how we're going to do this. Hang on a second. All right. So, how do we achieve getting the civil authority to work for us instead of what appears to be working against us? It comes down to, you have to accept the office. And so, a week or so ago, 2 weeks now maybe, the Pope was talking about little green Martians in reference to, of all things, baptizing illegitimate children. Around the same time, I'm putting out these videos saying, hey, we're all illegitimate according to canon law. Just look at your sacramental record, your baptismal certificate, and if it was to list your mom and dad on there, and you read the canon law, that's saying that you're an illegitimate child. And, you know, your mom is in her maiden name, and it's just like your birth records. Same way. You were declared illegitimate at birth. I believe it was your original sin, or the earthly manifestation of your original sin make you illegitimate. Because in the Old Testament, you can't inherit. Right? Being illegitimate isn't good. And as we're going to see, that would affect patrimony also. And there's patrimony involved in this, because when we accept the office in the church, it comes with a benefice. Right? You get a stipend. You get paid. You are going to be working for God. You're going to go to the vineyard. Right? This is all about going to the vineyard. Quit standing at the corner, go to the vineyard and start the harvest. But in that conversation, or in the speech that the Pope gave, he said, in the early church, even today, there is the ministry of the osterary. Brackets usher. Right? Now they have ushers, but it isn't the usher. Right? It's the ministry of the osterary. That's the office. That's the name of the office. If you go become an usher at a parish, it's different than being an osterary for the church. That's the way I look at it. Two different jurisdictions. Right? I'm not there for that building church. I'm an osterary, a doorkeeper, a porter, a guard, a temple guard. These are the same as the temple guards in the Old Testament of the church. And it's called the ministry of the osterary, office of the osterary. And what did the osterary do? He opened the door, received the people, allowed them to pass. But it was never the ministry of the closed door. Never. Right? So we're going to let the people go through the door into the kingdom of heaven. But somebody has to be there to hold the door first, and we haven't accepted the office. Porter. Doorkeeper. Right? This part here comes out of the Catholic Encyclopedia that you can find on newadvent.org. And a lot of this I've already talked about, so I'm going to kind of skim through it quicker and just go to the highlighted stuff. But I've done a couple other videos on this, so if you were to do a search on the last month or so, you'll see a couple other videos having to do with church stuff. And one having to do with federal question jurisdiction, which, you know, should be where we're going to based on what it says. But if you can't get it there, then the other option is go see if you can get it through the church, and just look at the structure of the church a little bit different. And as we're going to here, it'll all start to make sense. So I had these guys called the doorkeeper. Roman days, they were slaves, guarded the entrance of the house. At the end of the 2nd century, so this is way old, right? The Christian communities began to own houses holding church services and for administration. And so we know in the Bible that Peter said, go pick 70 all and, have them clear the tables, take over the administration. We need to go preach the word, but somebody needs to do all the other things the church says they're going to do besides talk about it. We're going to go talk about it. All right, so here's what we got. You got people who talk about it. They're the theologians, right? You got people who want to judge it. They're the canons, but you don't have any doers. There's no doers in the church. The church is lacking the doers, the ones that are going to go do the administration. And that's what the doorkeeper does. He's going to go do the administration. The doorkeeper is going to determine who's in the kingdom of heaven. Because the kingdom of heaven is already here, and the problem is Satan came in the door. We need to kick his ass out. We didn't do a very good job of keeping the kingdom. So since the end of the 2nd century, 251 it was written. This is in the Pope, the Church of Rome, I believe it was. Antioch, right? That ostraries are written. Lectors, exorcists. They even make you an exorcist. But you got to be able to read Latin, I think. Might have to do a little study to get that one. In Western Europe, the office of ostrary was the lowest grade of minor clergy. And that's what we're dealing with, right? We're in Western Europe. So, office of ostrary was the lowest grade of minor clergy. The ostraries were mentioned among the clergy that have the right of personal immunity. That's one of the reasons you want the office, because it has the ecclesiastic privileges that come with having an office in the church. For without this prerequisite, an applicant could at most only fill the office of ostrary, right? So if you couldn't read, basically, the best you could be is an ostrary. They really like to downplay the job. That's always good. Right? Because whatever seems to be the lowest is where we're supposed to be, and it will be the most powerful office in the church. As you'll see, it gives you access to certain courts and stuff. So for the Gallican rite, short statements concerning ordination, lower orders, among them ostraries, are found in this something or other, this Statutes Ecclesiasticae Antiqua, 6th century. And accordingly, it said in there that the ostraries are first instructed in their duties by the archdeacon. So again, we're going to be looking for the guy who holds the office, the title, the position, whether it's called that or not, of the archdeacon. After this, he brings them before the bishop, who takes the keys of the church from the altar. So we're going to take the keys of the lowercase church, and I didn't say parish. In fact, when I look at my baptismal certificate, my church, when it's talking about it, it doesn't call it a church, it calls it a worship center. That's back in 1958. So it was a worship center, right? So the lowercase church is the that's the common church. That's the universal church. The people of God church, the one that doesn't have any borders. The whole frickin' world is covered by the church. Anyway, so he's going to take the keys of that church and give them to the candidate. And then tell the candidate, fulfill thine office to show that thou knowest that thou wilt give account to God concerning the things that are locked away under these keys. If you let it in the kingdom of heaven and it shouldn't be here, it's your fault now. You're going to take the job, you better clean up the act. Wonderful. Sign me up. Sign me up. I'm a doer, man. Give me them keys. If they can't do it, and as it turns out they can't, because that's part of when they get their ordination into holy orders, is they give up these rights to have anything to do with the civil power. Sort of like Rod Glass was talking about the 14th Amendment, and he was reading something that, apparently was from a public servant, explaining the second section of the 14th Amendment is how they've taken their office and how they've given up their rights and so forth for this other thing, right? So now they're supposed to be working in our best interest, and they're not. However, in the church, when somebody goes in to become a priest, and goes through ordination to the holy orders, apparently they give up some of their powers, some of their personal, they give up their personal sovereignty. Let's put it that way. And you're not going to. This is the only office available that you don't need to give up your sovereignty for within the church. Outside of Rome, in the late Roman era and the one following, the ossuaries were actually employed as guardians of the church buildings and their contents. They actually did that at one time. Later, however, the Latin Church, the office of the ossuary, universally remained only one of the degrees of ordination, and the actual work was transferred to the laity. So there isn't really a job at the church building. That's been given to the laity. But it's just one of the degrees, right? It's like you're going to go get your degree. You've graduated. And it's the only one you need. Just need the one. If you want to be an exorcist, hey, you might be able to get that one too. In the ordination of ossuaries at the present day, their duties are thus enumerated in the pontifical. See, so in the ordination of ossuaries at the present day, okay, they're still being ordinated. Even though they talk about these ushers, don't get hung up in the usher. You want the office of the ossuary. And say the Pope talked about it when he was talking about Martians, right? The forms of prayer for the ordination are similar to those of the old Gallican rite, so that's what they're going to do. They're going to hand you some keys, right? Symbolically giving you the keys to the gates of the kingdom of heaven and putting you on guard duty, right? Go take a post. It's just military now, man. It's just, all right, think about it. It's military. Anybody been in the military knows what Article 15 is. Article 15 is the first piece of paper that starts any kind of action if it's going to be an administrative discipline or a court-martial. We're going to be filling out Article 15s on things that we see, people we see not doing what they're supposed to because they're baptized Christians. And all baptized Christians are under the jurisdiction of the Pope, and we're going to have access to a special court that cares about that stuff and wields the civil and can wield the civil authority or the civil power. Like the acolytes and exorcists, they were only appointed to serve the church but received no actual ordination, right? No actual ordination. You're not going to be ordained. And we're not regarded as belonging to the ecclesiastic hierarchy. Not to the ecclesiastic hierarchy, but you are to the hierarchy of the church because you're going to have an office in the church. So you are part of the hierarchy. According to apostolic constitutions belonging at the end of the 4th century, the guardian of the door of the church during the service was the duty of the deacons. Thus, the doorkeepers exercised their office only when services were not being held. Right? So you can't be an usher. There we go, right? You can't be an usher. You don't have those offices, or you don't exercise the duties of the office when services are on. That's the job of the deacons. So the deacons may run the ushers during the service, but that isn't the one you want. You want to be the doorkeeper whose office is when there is no service. Ordination. The Greek acknowledged 5: bishop, priest, deacon, subdeacons, readers. The same number is found in St. John something. In ancient Greek churches, acolytes, exorcists, doorkeepers were probably considered only as offices. Again, we want an office. Okay. Oh, okay. And then as far as there was no doubt in the first institution that deaconesses were intended to discharge those same charitable offices connected with temporal well-being of their poor fellow Christians, which were performed by the men, for the men by the deacons. The Apostolic Constitution expressly attributes to them the duty of guarding the doors and maintaining order amongst their own. So women are doorkeepers also. Right? So if you're a woman and you're going to go to get this office, then you say, well, we're talking about the deaconess and guarding the door. If you have any questions, call the Pope. minor orders. The lower degree of the hierarchy. Right? It didn't say ecclesiastic hierarchy. Now it just says the word hierarchy. So you are part of the hierarchy. Moreover, ecclesiastics as a general rule no longer remain at the lower orders. So the ecclesiastic hierarchy doesn't stay at the lower orders, but the doorkeeper is always a doorkeeper. Formerly, one entered the clergy by being appointed to discharge any of the functions reserved to ecclesiastics. Such functions were of two kinds. Liturgical, ones constituted orders, though of a lower rank. By ordination, the recipients of minor orders received official authority to perform these functions. The other ecclesiastical functions were rather offices entrusted to clerics, whether ordained or not. That's us. We're that one. We're the other. They were rather offices entrusted to clerics, whether ordained or not. And we're not going to be ordained, yet we will have an office within the church. Thus, in the first centuries, there figured in the ranks of the clergy. You had notaries, had defenders of the church. In the economy teachers, cantors, cemeteries, to say nothing of deaconesses. These are all offices of the early church. And I'm not going to do it in this video, it would just take too long, but there's a lot of things that were written in Vatican II that talks about going back to, to change and back closer to what the church was. At least that's the way I read it. Briefly, it appears that the obligation of receiving all minor orders without exception is a law dating from the time when the minor orders ceased to be exercised in the original way. All right, it just appears, it's presumed, but it doesn't mean that it is. This is where presumption needs to be rebutted. And this is important. Minor orders are conferred by presentation to the candidate of the appropriate instruments in accordance with ritual given by we saw it earlier, right? Statutes of the ancient church. By papal privilege, several prelates can confer these orders. So, archdeacon, prelate. Those two words go together now. All right, several prelates can confer these orders. Clerics of minor orders also enjoy all ecclesiastic privileges. Well, what does that mean? Privileges in favor of the clergy are personal inviolability. They can't handcuff you, they can't touch you, can't disturb your peace. A special court, immunity from certain burdens, and the right to proper maintenance. That would be your benefice. In addition, the clergy has precedence of the laity in religious assemblies and processions, a special place of the church, and titles of honor. These honors increase according to the higher order of the office. The privilege of the canon. In earlier canon law, the injury and wounding of a cleric was punished by severe canonical penances. The privilege of the forum secures to the clergy a special tribunal in civil and criminal causes before an ecclesiastic judge. Now, it didn't say that you had to be going to the court as the plaintiff or as the defendant. You can go there as the plaintiff. And it's a tribunal for civil and criminal causes against a baptized Christian who's sitting there as a judge or sitting there as an attorney trying to take somebody's property using color of law. We need the civil authority to step in. Right, so we're going to be taking the complaint to the correct jurisdiction that can do something about it. That's all we're doing. Been trying to give this complaint to somebody who cares, right? Looking for the Court of Chancery for 3 years now. It would make sense it's in the church since they're the ones who set it up. Just, hard to believe. Got to get past that thing. Oh my God, the church. Oh no. They wear fish hats. Oh well. I'm eating fish on Friday again. That all complaints of and against clerics be laid first before the bishop for settlement. Should no settlement be reached, the case may then be brought before the secular court. Privileges of immunity. the exemption of ecclesiastic persons, things, and places from the general obligation and taxes. Right? You don't have to, you're not going to participate in the world and the way the world runs their business. You don't have to sit on juries or any of that kind of crap anymore. You have to pay there are a few taxes you need to pay, whatever that is. It's just got to be paid for. But let's go find out what that means. The privileged competence, this right possessed by clergy in accordance with which, in case of executions against their property and income sufficient to constitute livelihood, must be left to them. In both theory and practice, the privilege afforded protection from personal arrest, foreclosure of a mortgage, and from immediate vacation of property in favor of a layperson. It is also extended to the patrimony forming the title of ordination. You got yourself some patrimony coming. As the privilege clericorium are the legal consequences of religious station granted for the protection of the clerical calling, they may not be in the rights of a class be waived by any individual, nor may they be withdrawn from an individual except in specified cases. What is this? What are we looking at here? This is properly, okay, we're talking about benefits now. Properly, the term benefits is often understood to denote either certain property destined for the support of ministers of religion or a spiritual office or function such as the care of souls, but in the strict sense it signifies a right. Benefice is a right. The right given permanently by the church to a cleric. The church is going to give you a right and they can't take it back. To receive ecclesiastic revenues on account of performance of some spiritual service. 4 characteristics essential for every benefice are: benefice cleric being usufructuary and not proprietor of the source of his support. Usufruct. You're going to get the use of the property of the church. But you don't have to pay the income tax on it or the personal property tax. It's not yours. It's a gift. It's part of your inheritance. A twofold perpetuity, objective and subjective, inasmuch as source of income must be permanently established, and at the same time, the appointment to the benefits must be for life and not subject to revocation, save for causes and in the case of it specified by law. A formal decree of ecclesiastic authority giving to certain funds or property the character or title of a benefice. An annexed office. Right? Got to have an office. They're going to write a piece of paper. It's going to be permanent. And you're just going to have the use of, not the ownership of. And you were complaining the Vatican had all that cash stashed. And in the base and spiritual teaching, that they who serve the altar should live by the altar. The church, to have at her command clerics who might devote themselves freely to the works of religion. That's what they're going to give it to you for, so you can go out and preach the word. So you can go out and do what we have been mandated by Christ to do as laity, and that's conform the temporal order to the will of the Lord. That's our job. The theologian's job is to go out and preach the word, the gospel. Right? We have the administration of what's supposed to happen. Benefits can only be created by ecclesiastic authority. That's simple enough. Benefits once erected is understood to be perpetual. Yep, I agree with that. Townser is necessary for all benefices. Oh man, they want to cut your hair off. That's what Paul did, right? They cut all Paul's hair off before he went into the temple. But as we'll see, they're overlooking this these days. Before the Council of Trent, a simple benefice could lawfully be conferred on a cleric as early as his 7th year, but since the Council, the recipient of a simple benefice must be in his 14th year. Puberty. So if your children are 14 years or older and they've been baptized, they already have. They already have whatever they need for their life set aside for them in the church. Think about that. The appointee must be of legitimate birth. Aha! That's the problem, right? That's the problem with that damn baptismal certificate having mom and dad's name on. It shows you're illegitimate. So they're going to have to fix their records. Downser, sacred rite instituted by the church. Shearing of his hair, investment of a surplice. A long sleeve tunic of half length made of fine linen. Historically, Downser was not in use in the primitive church. Excellent. Right? Wasn't used in the old church, so they're not going to make you do it. During the age of persecution, even later, St. Jerome disapproves of clerics shaving their heads. However, the custom passed over to secular clergy. Or this is when they cut the lock off your hair when you're a baby at your baptism. At least I think they do that. The ceremony may be performed at any time or place. As to the monastic tonsure, some writers have distinguished three kinds. The Roman, that of St. Peter, where all the head is shaved except a circle of hair. The Eastern, or St. Paul's, where the entire head is denuded of hair. And the Celtic, or St. John's, where only a crescent of hair is shaved from the front of the head. In English-speaking countries, for a custom arising in the days of persecution and having a prescription for over 3 centuries, the shaving the head, the priestly crown, seems with tacit consent of the Holy See to have passed out of use. In other words, because that persecution by they did a prescription, which is basically the Pope saying, we're going to excuse you from having to do that. And they just, it's something that they've never undone. It was done. It's not been undone, so it's still in place. There's a prescription that says, if you're in an English-speaking country, you don't need to shave your head. No provincial or national council has ordered it, even when treating of clerical dress, and the Holy See has not inserted the law when correcting the decrees of those councils. Doesn't mean you couldn't do it. Maybe you want to do it. That freaked them judge out first time you walked into court with a shaved head. I'm here to take your testimony, judge. Election. So how does this happen, right? They talked about this presentation, which is a kind of election. So election means choice among many persons. Stricter juridical sense, it means the choice of one person among many for definitive charge or function. If we confine ourselves to ecclesiastic law, canonical election, in a broad sense, would be any designation of a person to an ecclesiastic charge or function. Right? So what's a canonical election? The designation of a person to an ecclesiastic charge or function. It's understood to include various modes. So now there's different modes of election. You got postulation, presentation, nomination, recommendation, request or petition, and finally free collation. Presentation, on the contrary, differs from election, not in respect to the person elected, but to the electors. It is the exercise of the right of patronage, and the patron may be a layman. Now the patron's the person who's going to get the benefits. That's you. You're the patron. Whereas the electors to an ecclesiastic dignities must be clerics. It is the exercise of the right of patronage, and the patron, so what do they call it? They got a name for the position that creates the benefice, and then he has the right of patronage to determine who it's going to go to, and the patron is the person that ends up going to. So, if you want to look at it from the use angle, a completed use, that the Lord is the established it, you're the beneficiary of it, the trustee is the church. Whereas the electors to ecclesiastic dignities must be clerics. And we're going to get an ecclesiastic dignity. So the electors are the ones, not the one being elected, but the ones allowing the election to happen, right? This is the archdeacon we're talking about. In both cases, the right of a candidate is the same. While an election calls for canonical confirmation, presentation by a patron leads to canonical institution by a competent prelate. So presentation by a patron means when you go present yourself to the prelate, you're going to have you'll have a thing, whatever they mean by it, we'll see in a minute. A canonical institution basically means you're going to get an office. Which what this is saying is you're going to present yourself to a prelate for your office. Moreover, when the right of patronage belongs to a moral body, chapter or entire congregation, presentation may have to follow along the lines of election, though frequently called nomination, the designation of bishops and beneficed clergy by the civil authority, in virtue of concordance in its is in reality presentation and results in canonical institution. The designation of bishops and beneficed clergy by the civil authority. So who's the civil authority, right? It's not the state of Michigan. It's an office within the church. The church is over the civil authority. Unum Sanctum said so. They are the civil authority. So we're going to go to the guy in the church that's the civil authority, who happens to be an archdeacon or a prelate. Persons eligible. Those persons are eligible who meet the requirements of common ecclesiastic law or special statutes for the charge or functions in question. Hence, each election it is necessary to ascertain what is required of the candidate. And for the porter, office of the ostery, there isn't any. You don't even need to be able to read or write. You need to be 14. Some of the aforesaid requirements are easy to verify, such as proper age, adequate knowledge, blah, 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 blah. The same with, are you legitimate? But it is principally candidates of sensible morality who are termed unworthy. The sacred canons constantly repeat that unworthy must be set aside. The unworthy persons are all outside the church, viz., infidels, heretics, and schismatics. Now, outside the church. What church are we speaking of? I say they're talking about the universal church of Jesus Christ. And if you're okay with the Apostles' Creed and yada yada yada, I think you're in. Right? That's part of the Catholic Church has been making up with everybody they can. Right? We're going to go back to the old days. So, right, there's just very few things you need to be able to follow. One of them would be, you can't have a problem with the Apostles' Creed. You have to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Things like that, you're in. And so you would go through your church denomination to find the guy who's holding the office similar to the archdeacon. And so like in the Episcopal Church, they still have a guy called the archdeacon. And I believe he's holding that office exactly like it talks about. It's the archdeacon. And you just need to tell them you want to claim your office. So who else can? All who have guilty of great crimes, sacrilegious, forgers, perjurers, sodomites. Looks like no attorneys are going to get in. Attorneys and judges, you're not coming in. You better go repent. You can't hold the office. But once we have the office, we can take you to our court. All whom law or fact, for whatever reason, have branded as infamous. All under censure, excommunication. Do you realize that if you are a Freemason, you are ipso facto excommunicated at the time of you signing that paperwork, becoming a Freemason? You can't hold an office. You don't get to be in the kingdom of heaven. All whom irregularity, particularly a penal one, debars them from receiving or exercising holy orders. Those are also excluded who at the time of election hold several incompatible benefices or dignities without dispensation. So, before we go any further, those of you who believe that within the church there's a pedophilia ring and all sorts of debauchery going on, you're probably correct. If you want to take care of that, you need to go claim the office and go point it out. You're not going to do it through the secular courts out here. That nobody's holding the office, man. That's the point. There's nobody out here actually holding an office. It's all color of law. Postulation is a petition presented to a competent ecclesiastic superior that he may promote to a certain dignity a person who is not strictly eligible on account of some canonical impediment which is usually dispensable. Such impediments are, for example, illegitimate birth. Ha! So even though it shows on your paperwork that you have illegitimate birth, they can do a postulation petition presented to a competent ecclesiastic superior. I don't know if we give it to them or not. I'm just saying there's the escape from the clause that said patrimony can't go to an illegitimate child. Canonical institution. In its widest signification, canonical institution denotes any manner in accordance with canon law of acquiring an ecclesiastic benefice, right? So if you're going to get a benefice, you're going to have a canonical institution. In the strictest sense, the word denotes a collation of an ecclesiastic benefice by a legitimate authority on the presentation of a candidate by a third person. Right of presentation, out of gratitude for the foundation or endowment of churches and benefices. The church grants founders, well, who founded the church? Jesus Christ did. If they wish to reserve it, the right of patronage, the first and chief privilege of which is the right of presenting a cleric for the benefice. All right, so the founder, Jesus Christ, puts you on the earth, and you're going to go claim the office that he left for you. Presentation, therefore, means the naming to the ecclesiastic authorities of a suitable cleric, thereby conferring on the later the right to have the vacant benefice. And what document could you possibly have that would show that? I'm going to say it's your baptismal certificate. You were baptized into the body of Christ. Now you're over the age of 14, you can go claim your office. Like election and nomination, presentation confers on the cleric presented a real right, so that the ecclesiastic superior entrusted with the institution may not give the benefice to another. There are many forms of the right of patronage. Here we need to refer only to the right of ecclesiastic patronage belonging to ecclesiastic bodies such as a chapter, and to the right of lay patronage, right? Patronage of a lay person, possessed by laymen or ecclesiastics in their private capacity. Hence, there exist notable differences in the manner of exercising the right of patronage, as might naturally be expected, especially when we remember that the foundations or endowments given rise to the right of ecclesiastic patronage are made with property already belonging to the church. It's the church's property. They're the ones that be giving the property away. Theoretically, no special form of presentation is necessary. It suffices if the act signifies the presentation. Show up at his door. And excludes any that might indicate a coalition of a benefice, and if there are no simony in practice, it be made in writing, generally after voting take place arrangements when the patron is not an individual, but it is an individual. It is communicated to the ecclesiastic superior, usually the bishop, who has to perform the canonical institution. Somebody has to hand you the keys. And again, canonical institution, strictest sense, denotes collation of an ecclesiastic benefice by a legitimate authority on the presentation of candidate by a third party, by a third person, the bishop. The patron exercises his right personally if past the age of puberty. Right, now we're talking about you. The patron, you're going to exercise your right personally if you're after the age of 14, although he may act by an attorney. If he has not attained this age, he must act through those who have authority over him, mother, guardian, protector. But once you have, you go present yourself. If the patron is an individual, he makes the presentation by himself. If the patron is an individual, he makes the presentation by himself. You show up with your baptismal certificate. And then ecclesiastic dignitary. These dignitaries, as they are called, are usually the provost and dean, sometimes also the custos and the scholasticus. So, the provost is another name for an archdeacon. They also call him provost, right? So remember that. Provost, dean, archdeacon, prelate. I think we're going to be able to narrow it down a little bit more because they have this college of counselors or something like that we're going to look at here in a minute. And I think that whoever heads that up is this provost that we're talking about. That's where it's going to take a few phone calls, or that's why the more people that would just go down and ask these questions: who's the provost of the diocese? Who's holding the position of the archdeacon? Yeah, I know we don't use it anymore here in the Catholic Church, but yeah, still, who is it? Patron and patronage. By the right of patronage, it is understood a determined sum of rights and obligations entailed upon a definite person, the patron, right? You, especially in connection with an assignment and administration of the benefits, not in virtue of his hierarchical position, but by the legally regulated grant to the church out of gratitude towards her benefactor. Right? So the benefactor, Christ, is the founder, the patron is you, and the church is the third party. They're the trustee. And what does entailed mean? Common law, fee tail or entail, the restriction on the sale or inheritance. So determine sum of rights and obligations entailed, inherited, upon a definite person. All right, that's the way I look at it. It's just restricted who it can go to. It can only go to a person. Can't be sold. It's his inheritance whenever he comes and gets it. The fee tail, it also had the effect of disabling illegitimate children from inheriting. Right? So, for whatever reason, that's the way it was written, so that illegitimate children couldn't inherit. And this, all goes to why our paperwork shows we're illegitimate. We're going to get in to fix the paperwork, or get a blessing that okay, we'll take you anyways, because once they give you the office, they can't take it back. Inasmuch as the rights of a patron pertain to the spiritual order, the right of patronage is designated in the decretal something or other, and therefore subject to ecclesiastic legislation and jurisdiction. Since, however, the question of property rights is also involved, a far-reaching influence is yielded today by civil laws and civil courts in matters pertaining to patronage. Right? They're going to make sure if we don't do it exactly right, we ain't getting it. Now, an interesting side story. Way back when, 3 years ago, when I really first got started with this stuff, I was involved in a phone call with some other gentlemen that had sent an instrument that they had drafted to the Pope trying to have their baptismal records removed from the church. And they didn't get an answer. And so Steve, one of the guys that did it, is in Texas. He took his, I believe, down to a college that had a Jesuit sitting there as the principal, the dean of the school. And he went and talked to this guy, said, hey, we sent this to the Pope and he didn't remove our records. I want to have my record removed from the church. And I guess the dean looked it over and pulled out his seals and stuff, signed some shit, did some stuff, put whatever he did in an envelope, or at least part of it in an envelope, and gave it back to Steve. And it had on there his given name, like Robert Allen, not Ritluski. And Steve said, "Where's the Ritluski?" I said, "That is your name, right? That's your name right there." So, sometime not too long later, Steve called his church where he was baptized at, so I could have got my baptismal record. And he got a call back from that and says, "Well, this is strange. We don't seem to have your record. Are you sure that you were baptized here?" "Well, sure, I was baptized here." "Yeah." "Well, is there any chance that you were married in a Catholic church?" "Yeah, I was," he says. And they said, "Why don't you call there?" Because they would have had a copy too. You would have had to send a copy, had to have given them a copy as part of the marriage. And so he went over to the other church, and they didn't have it either. Now, in the church he had been baptized in, all his other siblings are in the book. Steve was no longer in the book. Steve got what he wanted from this dean, who was a Jesuit of a college. I don't know what the name of the college was. I don't know any more about it, but right, so that's a kind of a dean, isn't it? Is that the one we're talking about? I don't know. I can just tell you that archdeacon and the word dean comes up, and the word prelate comes up, and so forth and so on. But we got a couple more things to look at that may help us narrow it down. So give me just okay. I'm gonna go through a few pieces of paper. I'm gonna keep popping them up as we go. Here's one that talked about the current legislation on citizenship in the Vatican City State, and the fact that only 450 of its residents have Vatican citizenship. And so this guy wanted to know why it was, and he checked out these laws. So you can look this up yourself. I mean, you can Google the current legislation on citizenship in the Vatican City State, July 18, 2012, by Tina Geen. The Holy See represents the universal government of the Catholic Church and is considered a juridical entity under international law, but it does not possess the attributes of a sovereign state. It doesn't have territory. Holy See doesn't. But it got the territory when they created Vatican City State. As a consequence of the sovereignty, each state determines the ways to acquire citizenship. Right? So, however, due to the particularities of the Vatican City State, this sovereign entity has utilized other factors to determine whether a person can be considered one of its citizens. So it used to be place of birth, by blood, place of residence is how you got your citizenship. Vatican City picked a different one. So what they did, though, is under the new legal regime, citizenship can be acquired by law, ex jure, or by administrative decision. And we're going to go see the administrators. The ex jure citizenship is granted to only 3 classes of persons: cardinal residents in Vatican City State or in Rome, the Holy See's diplomats, like the nuncios, and persons who reside in Vatican City State by reason of their office or service. And you're going to take an office within the church, and that office is out of Vatican City State. You just happen to be a missionary church, but your office comes from headquarters. Pursuant to acquisition of citizenship by administrative decision can only be requested in 3 situations: by residents of Vatican City State when they are authorized for reason of their office or service. Right? So again, you get the office, you can ask for the citizenship. By administrative decision. As part of you giving your office, when you go to get this office of the ostiary, I think it already comes with it. And then the spouse and children of current citizens, right? So once you become a citizen, everybody in your family is, right? There goes the hands of protection around your family. When your kids turn 14, they can go get their own benefits. They don't need to go work in this bullshit system we have, and they can go to school and they can learn what they want to learn to be the best they can be and give it away for free because they don't need the money. It's a wonderful concept. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, now we're just going to look at more things about the archdeacon to see if we can identify this guy. All right, we're going to find him. Anglican Church, pretty easy. They still call him the archdeacon. Roman Catholic Church, not quite so much. The Oxford Dictionary on the Christian Church has defined archdeacon as a cleric having a defined administrative authority delegated to him by the bishop in whole or in part of the diocese. The Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church. You must be talking about the Universal Catholic Church. So an archdeacon is a cleric having defined administrative authority delegated to him by the bishop in the whole or part of the diocese. Now, this is lowercase bishop. This isn't coming from the bishop of that diocese. This guy gets his authority from the Pope. In the Catholic Church, the post of archdeacon, generally a priest, was once of great importance, blah, 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 blah. Such officials as auxiliary are now coadjutor bishops, vicar general, episcopal vicar, vicar forain, dean, or archpriest. In the 11th century England, a diocese was meant to be about 3,000 square miles. This would imply every part was reachable within a single day's ride. Right, so that's how big a diocese is. So, like I would say that would, when they say the diocese of course, in the 11th century, we're talking riding a horse. How far can you ride or walk in a day? The response to the demands of such distance and terrain, increasing demands of church business, was territorial subdivision. The primary unit of subdivision of the diocese was the archdeaconry. There you go. So these archdeacons became the administrators for the church within a certain district, within a certain territory. Right? That's why they had all these monasteries all over Europe. That was the administrative headquarters of the church in the territory. The spiritual headquarters, because the administrative, that's the temporal side. The spiritual is the church and the cathedral, but that's the door to the left. The door to the right takes you into the administrative office. And this archdeacon ends up being the same as, what do they call him? The diocese administrator, which is different than the chancellor that you see when you look online for the chancellor of the diocese. That chancellor is for the diocese in the, what do I want to say? The theologian side, not in the canonical side, not in the temporal side. That's the strictly spiritual. We're trying to get to the temporal side, the one that controls the civil authority. An archdeacon, generally an ordained priest, acts as a bishop's representative. He ensures all the other priests have proper training. It's currently in disuse in the Latin Rite. Doesn't mean it isn't there, it just isn't used the way it should be. Anglican community, archdeacons serve the church within a diocese by taking particular responsibility for buildings, including church buildings, welfare of clergy, their families, and the implementation of diocese policies for the sake of the gospel, blah, 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 right? So you go to him to claim your office, and he's the one who sends you your check. Or gets you your citizenship papers, or your Holy See passport. In some parts of the Anglican community, when women cannot be consecrated bishops, the position of archdeacon is effectively the most senior office a female cleric can have. Right? So apparently women can hold an office in the church. That's the main thing. This is where men and women will be made the same, because they can both hold an office in the church. According to the canons of the Eastern Church, an archdeacon is the highest priestly rank. He's the head of all the clerics belonging to a bishopric. Archdeacon serving the head of all priests of Malabar, presenting the bishop's will. He was the prince and head of the Christians of St. Thomas. The prince and head, right? He's the top dog there. I am the gate of the sheep. That's what we're trying to find. Okay. Archpriest. Archpriest closely resembles a rural or area dean. The reason you're looking for an archpriest is because they go together. The archpriest and the archdeacon, I think on this other sheet we'll see both those offices would go with a particular grouping of people. But the archdeacon is actually over the archpriest. But if you can find an archpriest, he would certainly know who the archdeacon is. Okay. Roman Catholicism, Byzantine Christianity. I don't think there's any more secular clergy. The term secular clergy refers to deacons and priests who are not monastic or members of a religious institute. They are referred to as the diocesan or right. Okay, that's why the guy's called the diocesan administrator. They are referred to as the diocesan or sometimes archdiocesan clergy. Excellent. It's kind of who we're looking for. Diocesan or archdiocesan clergy. In the Catholic Church, the secular clergy are the clergy ministers such as deacons and priests who do not belong to a religious institute. While regular clergy take religious vows of chastity, poverty, obedience, and follow the rule of life and institute that belong, the secular clergy do not take vows, and they live in the world at large rather than a religious institute. Right? So that's the clergy we are. We're going to be secular clergy. We're trying to find the dude who's over the secular clergy. Canon law makes specific demands on clergy, whether regular or secular, quite apart from obligations consequent to religious vows. Clerics, other than permanent deacons, are obliged to observe perfect perpetual continence in sake of the kingdom and heaven, therefore bound to celibacy. Other than permanent deacons. We're not moving in. We're never going to the holy orders unless you decide you want to. If you're not, then you're good. They are forbidden to assume public office which entail a participation in the exercise of the civil power. Well, so we can't take an office which entails participation in the exercise of the civil power. We're not going to be exercising the civil power. That would be the execution of the law. Right? We're just going to bring it to the intention that somebody's breaking the law. That's how I'm going to look at it in my head. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, a lot of these I showed in an earlier video, but what I'm trying to do now is just point out that the office we're looking for is whatever is called as the archdeacon. So he presides in chapter at the election of the vicar capitular, who within 8 days of the death of the bishop is to be chosen as the administrator of the vacant see. He presides in a chapter at the election of the vicar, and the vicar is going to play administrator until a new bishop has been appointed. Does that mean the archdeacon's the vicar? Or does that mean he's the president of the chapter that's going to elect the vicar? I don't know. But the point is, if we find this chapter, we can ask them who he is. Because he's of great importance in diocesan administration. And they have a guy called the diocesan administrator. So I just believe that that's who they're talking about, that that's who the archdeacon is. We also occasionally find other names used to indicate the office. The beginnings of the archdeaconate are found in the first 3 centuries. We already knew that. He was made assistant to the work of. He was made an assistant in the work of ecclesiastic administration. Right? He's got other people go out there and preach the word, which is all good. We should all do that, but we got the theologians. And we got the canonists, but we ain't got no doers. We need people out there doing. And that's the administrators. Who's going to administrate the kingdom of heaven? He thus became a special procurator, right? He just became your attorney. A person who manages the affairs of another by virtue of a charge received from him. There are different kinds of procurators, general or particular, according to as he is authorized to manage all the affairs of another, or only some of them. A procurator may represent another in juridical matters, right? So there you go. He's going to be your attorney. I'm sure this guy knows what needs to be done to get you out of a color law court case, or in matters not requiring court proceedings. So he can don't have to be court. He can do other things. Special procurators, a general agent of university or corporation, blah, 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 blah. Beginning in the 4th century, this specialized activity of the Diaconus Episcopi takes on gradually the character of a juridical ecclesiastic office. In the round of ecclesiastic administration, certain duties appear attached by law to the office of the archdeacon. Again, I think that, I found this guy called the diocese administrator, but it looked like he was only there whenever the bishop had passed away. I don't know. It's either the diocesan administrator or it's the president of this group, of this college of people that are going to pick the diocesan administrator. His hands were entrusted to the preservation of the faith. The archdeacon was, moreover, the bishop's chief confidant. So he's his chancellor and his assistant, and when necessary, his representative in the exercise of manifold duties of the episcopal office. This was especially the case in the administration of ecclesiastic property, the care of the sick, the visitation of prisoners, and the training of the clergy. By virtue of his office, the archdeacon became, next to the bishop, the regular organ of supervision and discipline in the diocese. Right? He's the judge. In this respect, he was assigned a proper and independent jurisdiction, and even as late as the 12th century, there was constant effort to increase the scope of his authority. The first bishop to introduce the innovation, 774, what did he do? Oh, he split things into groups of 7, I think. And offset by the archdeaconi rural placed over deans, at a deanery, I guess. Henceforth, the archdiaconus magnus, or the cathedral, usually the provost or papirotus of the chapter, so there's a word to look up, praepostis, whose duties chiefly concern the city clergy. Who's over the city clergy? The archdeacon, generally a priest, either canons of a cathedral or provost of a principal church in small towns. They conducted courts of first instance. That's what the bishop's supposed to do. When you go to canon law, the place you open up your court case is the court of first instance. And we sent some stuff to the bishop before, at least I did, and the response I got was they couldn't get involved in civil matters. Well, they weren't lying. I sent it to the spiritual side of the court, not to the guy that's over the temporal side of the court. But the archdeacon was not only a judge, he was also prominent in ecclesiastic administration. That makes him a chancellor. He saw the archpriests perform their duties, he saw that archpriests perform their duties. So if you can find a guy called the archpriest, he's going to know who's above him, who's playing the role of the archdeacon. And then gave canonical investiture to the holders of prebends and authorized incorporation of the same. What's a prebend? The right of a member of a chapter to share in his revenues of the cathedral, also to the share which is entitled in general any portion of the cathedral revenues that's set aside for the support of the clergy attached to it. Right? So this has to do with the simple thing of being domiciled, where you need to go register your natural and legal person in your domicile of choice, and then that's the set of rules you're going to follow and whatever. And so we're going to go change our domicile, because in canon law, if you've been within a diocese territory more than 5 years, it is your domicile. If you move, you need to tell them you're moving and change your domicile, but that's only if you plan on moving. But ultimately, I guess what we're saying is our domicile is actually Vatican City State, and we're just out here in the Mission Church. And so we really don't want to ever move it. We're going to leave it right there. He could also drop legal documents. Sometimes they receive their office from the king. They had great authority, passing sentence on clerics guilty of grave crimes. Now, they tried to take a lot of these powers away, and so they say that the office is now not in use, or it's in disuse. Well, we're going to change that. We're going to put it into use. The Archdeacon of the Cathedral. So basically what happened since the time of this Council of Trent, we're talking about here, gradually disappear from places where they still existed. So they don't quite look the same. Does it mean the power is still there in the rules districts, or do we need to go to the cathedral? The Archdeaconate of the Cathedral, where the office was still retained, soon became practically an empty title. So they retained the office of the Archdeaconate at the cathedral. Soon became practically, however not completely, an empty title. And the chief duties of the incumbent were to assist the bishop in his pontifical duties and to vouch for the moral worthiness of candidates to ordination. That's what he still does. And that's what we're trying to get done, is go to the guy holding the office and get him to write the piece of paper. Among Protestants and the Anglicans, the office of Archdeacon, with its own special jurisdiction, still has it. Among the Anglicans preserved, along with the primitive ecclesiastic organization, the office of the Archdeacon with its own special jurisdiction. If you're an Anglican, or maybe if you're Protestant, you're supposed to go to the Anglicans, because the Anglicans are supposed to be the dividing line between the Protestants and the Catholics. I don't know. Provost. Another possible name. Every chapter had an archpriest and an archdeacon. The former officiated in the absence of the bishop. The former is the archpriest and general supervision of the choir, while the latter was the head of the chapter. Right? So the archdeacon's actually in charge of the chapter and administers its temporal affairs. At present, the chief dignity of a chapter is usually styled dean, though in some countries, as in England, the term provost is applied to him. So if you're a Catholic in England, look for the guy called the provost in your diocese. But he could be called a dean. The provost, by whatever name he may be known, is appointed by the Holy See in accordance with the fourth rule of the Roman Chancery. So when all else fails, tell him that. Well, I'm looking for the guy who was appointed in accordance with the fourth rule of the Roman Chancery. And who was he appointed by? Not the local bishop, appointed by the Holy See. So when he's representing the bishop, we're talking about he represents the Pope. Not the local bishop, he represents the Pope within the diocese. He presides in a chapter at the election of this vicar capitular, who within 8 days of the death of the bishop is to be chosen as the administrator of the vacant see. He presides in the chapter at the election. He conducts the ceremonies and the installation of canons elect. Invest them with canons elect. I'm going to say that he conducts the ceremony to make you a doorkeeper. Inquire, the first place after the bishop belongs to him. In his office to administer viectum to the bishop and to conduct the bishop's obsequies. That has to do with death, right? This is all, except for this part. Among the ancient Greeks, the custom prevailed, giving supper to those sending out on a journey. The provision of all things necessary for such a journey, provision, food, money, clothes, utensils, expenses. Right? That's what this via practicum is supposed to be about, and he administers it. Right? He's the guy that has your check waiting for you. I don't know that we need to do any more on this one. Okay, just a couple more and we're done. Hang on a second. Okay, diocesan administrator. A diocesan administrator in canon law. The College of Consultors elects an administrator within 8 days after the see is known to be vacant. The college must elect as administrator a priest, a bishop, at least 35. So it sounds like this office only exists during the time when there's not a bishop there. And so if this college doesn't do it within 8 days, then the metropolitan archbishop is going to. Right? So they got 8 days from the time a bishop dies to pick somebody. And this College of Consultors is supposed to do it. Well, the archdeacon is the guy who's supposed to preside over this College of Consultors. In a diocese, the College of Consultors consists of priests charged with advising the bishop. Some decisions require that they be given a hearing. Others require that their consent. When a see vacant, or basically a vacancy situation arises, the College of Consultors is obliged to elect a diocesan administrator within 8 days. So the guy that presides over this group is the archdeacon. Or at least he has the powers of the archdeacon. If a diocese has a coadjutor bishop, the coadjutor succeeds immediately to the episcopal see upon the previous bishop's death or resignation. There is no vacancy of the see. The see also does not become vacant if the Pope appoints an apostolic administrator. That's interesting, because when I went to Grand Rapids website, there's a guy there who is listed as I was looking for diocesan administrator, didn't find it, but I found apostolic administrator. The see does not become vacant if the Pope appoints an apostolic administrator. And I think the guy that's appointed, if I'm not mistaken, is the bishop that just retired. There's a bishop here that retired here this last year. A new bishop is in town. And I think they made the old bishop the apostolic administrator, so if the current bishop was to pass away, he would just step back in and be the bishop. But that doesn't mean that he's necessarily the diocesan administrator. He's the apostolic administrator. I have to look at that later. Before the election of the diocesan administrator of a vacant see, the governance of the see is entrusted to the powers of a vicar general, to the auxiliary bishop if there is one, or to the senior among them if there are several. Blah, 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 blah. Doesn't help us. The diocesan administrator has great powers, essentially those of a bishop, except in matters expected by their nature of the matter or expressly by canon law. Canon law subjects his activity to various legal restrictions, so forth and so on. So, an Episcopal conference can transfer the functions of the consultors to the cathedral chapter. In those countries with the Episcopal conference has transferred these functions, the cathedral chapter, and then the consultors elect the diocesan administrator, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Anyways, College of Consultors. So this is the Archdiocese of Baltimore, right? And they have this College of Consultors. And there they are. So one of these guys has to be sitting there as the in the role of the archdeacon. Right? Diocese of Austin, College of Consultors. A diocesan administrator, Father. So this is one that had been appointed. So in where was this? Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. As administrator of a diocese in Harrisburg, Father somebody likens his duties to that of a flight attendant carrying out airplane passengers. So this is the interesting thing. Because they're talking to this priest about being a diocesan administrator, who was appointed Vicar General Moderator of the Curia by the bishop some years ago, was elected the administrator 4 days after the bishop's death on May 2nd. He was elected by the College of Consultors, a diocesan body of 10 priests who selected from the council of priests by the bishop. All right, so he was elected diocesan administrator by this College of Consultors. So who's presides over the College of Consultors? I guess my point is, if they have a bishop, is he still, so now they get a new bishop, does that make this guy still the diocesan administrator? 4 days after the bishop's death. What bishop? Well, he was elected. No, I guess they didn't have one. See, the way it reads, they didn't have one before. Or maybe this guy stays the, I think what happens is this guy stays the diocesan administrator. There's always a diocesan administrator. And the one in power stays in power until the bishop dies, and then they pick another one for the next bishop. That's what's going on. And this guy stays a diocesan administrator. So there still should be a diocesan administrator, right? That's my point. The Royal Diocesan Administrator calls for Father Gillian to be much more behind the scenes than out in public, right? Because this guy's going to end up being the right-hand man of the next bishop to come into town. He's going to be his right-hand man. And so every time a bishop dies, they pick a new administrator. This college does. And then he would preside over that college from then on, probably. Interesting. The diocesan administrator enjoys the powers of a diocesan judge or a bishop. Yeah, I would believe that's true. Okay, so Bridgeport, Diocese of Bridgeport. Gerald A. Doyle has been named administrator of the Diocese of Bridgeport following the installation of somebody as Archbishop of Baltimore. Okay, so in this case, their bishop left to become the Archbishop of Baltimore from the Diocese of Bridgeport. So now there's a vacancy. Anytime there's a vacancy, these guys are going to get together and elect an administrator, a diocese administrator. I think this diocesan administrator is the guy we need to talk to. The process of selecting a new administrator to continue governance of the diocese is mandated by canon law, which requires each diocese to have a council of priests to assist the bishop in governance of the diocese. College of Consultors is comprised of priests, leaders, and represents a cross-section of the parishes and ministries of the diocese. Secular canons. One of the functions of the cathedral chapter in the Roman Catholic Church was to elect the vicar capitur, now named the diocese administrator, to serve during the vacancy period of the diocese. Right? He's going to represent the bishop until they put a new bishop in. Then he won't represent him anymore, but he'll still be holding that position. Looks like to me. Okay, almost done. I'm thinking one more. Okay, just real quick, a couple more things on the provost. Immediate subordinate to the abbot of a monastery or the superior of a single cell. The dean was similarly ranked official. When he introduced somebody here adopted the usage from the Benedictines when he introduced the monastic organization of canon law colleges, especially cathedral capiture colleges. The provost was normally held by the archdeacon. So the dean was similarly ranked, similar to the provost. So he's the same as the provost. So the dean of a cathedral capiture college, which is the dean of a monastic organization of canon law colleges, whoever that dean is, and so that could be who. That could be why. Maybe Steve down in Texas, when he went to see the dean, went to a Catholic university, canon law university, right? So he would have had these powers that we're talking about of being the archdeacon. Possibility. The provostship was normally held by the archdeacon, right? So who's the provost? The provost, or Propst in Germany, being an ordinary parish priest, had the privilege of wearing prelate's dress, right? They're prelates. And prelates get their power from the Holy See. The office of provost, category prelate with rank equivalent to that of a bishop. Major religious superior of his particular oratory. The heads of Augustine and Dominican friars are termed provosts or priors. If you know whether the Dominicans or the Augustinians are, go talk to them. Nostrarius, just one more time. Word sometimes anglicized as the ostery, but often literally translated to as porter or doorman, but never does it say usher. Originally was a servant, a guard posted at the entrance of the building. See also gatekeeper. Porter became the lowest of the four minor roles, or minor orders. So you call it porter, call it doorman, call it ostrary. I'm going to go with ostrary because that's what the Pope called it, and say, well, the Pope called it the ostrary when he was talking about green Martians. He said the office is still open. And you're supposed to have this tonsure, but apparently we don't have to have that anymore. Like the other minor orders and the subdiaconate, it's retained in the indolent Catholic society, such as priestly fraternity of Saint somebody. I forgot what that is. Okay. So in the new church, as we would call it, the after Vatican II church, they had ushers. Prior to the Vatican II church, they had doormen, doorkeepers, osteries, porters. But when they did the Vatican II and changed all the documentation around, they left this office open, and it says it's still there. Like the other minor orders and the subdiaconate, it is retained in the indolent Catholic society, such as priestly fraternity of Saint somebody. So there's somebody somewhere that knows that these offices exist, and certainly the Pope does. Thank you, Pope Francis. I never would have thought of that one. I hit it out of the park. You threw me another one like that, though. And for purposes of administration, church osteries are soon mentioned, right? For purposes of administration, who's going to administer the church? Who's going to go do the work? The doorman is. According to these, the osteries were first instructed in their duties by the archdeacon. After this, he brings them before the bishop, who takes the keys from the church, from the altar, hands them to the candidate for ordination, with the words, "Fulfill thine office, to show that thou knowest that thou wilt give account to God concerning the things that are locked away under these keys." I think he's giving you the keys to heaven and hell. What you bind on earth will be bound on earth. What you loose on earth will be loosed or in heaven, vice versa. You know what I'm talking about. Then follows a prayer from the candidate. Okay. Like the acolytes and exorcists, they were only appointed to serve the church and received no actual ordination. Yep, indolent church. Term of traditional Catholics who preferred to attend the older Tridentine form of Mass instead of the ordinary present-day form of Roman Rite liturgy, the Mass of Paul VI. So, all right, that's all I got for y'all. It looks like it's a matter of finding a guy that holds the power of the archdeacon, claiming the office of hostry. When you do that, you're going to get citizenship in the Holy See, and you're going to get a benefice. going to be removed from one society and be seen in another. And I believe that's the only way, that's the only salvation there is in the church. Otherwise, you're free game for these crazy bastards out here, and they ain't done yet. Because they ain't following the law. It's all color of law, and they don't seem to care. You can point it out to them, they still don't care. And good luck with that. I'm moving on. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see ya.